to order the Budget Oversight Committee scheduled for Tuesday, September 4. Councilmember Lowenthal. Here. Vice Chair O'Donnell.
Here.
Chair DeLong.
Here.
We have a quorum.
First item, please.
First item is a recommendation to approve the minutes for the Budget Oversight Committee meeting held Monday, August 27, 2012.
Move to approve. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Next item, please.
Item number 2 is a recommendation to receive and file an update on the city's fiscal year 2012 budget process.
Is there a staff report on this item?
There is none, Mr. Chair.
All right. Is there a motion to approve? Move to approve. Is there a second? All in favor? Aye. Next item.
Item number 3 is a recommendation to receive and file an update on the federal fiscal year 2013 budget.
I don't know if there's been any update, but is there a staff report?
There's no update.
Okay. Is there a motion to receive and file? All in favor? Aye. Next item.
Item number 4 is a recommendation to receive and file an update on the state's fiscal year 2012-13 budget.
I think there's a staff report on this one, yes?
Yes, there is. Mr. Chair, members of the committee, recently there was, the state legislative session just ended on Friday, so a number of bills have been passed. One of which that we are following very closely is pension reform, and we'll have some more information in the next couple weeks to share with the council and the committee. But in essence, there is a pension reform deal. It is going to allow for new hires in particular to have a lower pension cost. It is a very complex bill. Essentially, in looking at it, it does do some reforms that have been asked for by cities. There is a lot of questions and concerns about did it go far enough, especially as it relates to current employees and how much cost share that those current employees can be asked to make over the next several years. The legislative analyst, CalPERS actually came up with an analysis saying it's going to save, between 40 and 60 billion dollars, but most of those savings are in future years rather than the current year. So we can provide some additional information on pension reform. In summary, it really does look like for cities like Long Beach that have been leaders in pension reform, that it isn't going to be a huge change from what we've already negotiated and what we were working on negotiating. For cities that have not started at all on pension reform, it is going to provide them with additional savings, probably beyond that of which a city that has been engaged in pension reform is going to realize. And with that, I'm available to answer questions.
So not to be too parochial, but what's in it for us in the city of Long Beach? Or what do you see in there that will assist us in managing better our pension costs? If any.
Well, on a go-forward basis for new employees, all new employees will be placed into one tier. So it's 2 at 62, growing to 2.5 at 67. So basically there will be no choices for miscellaneous employees. That will be the single tier. There's actually 3 tiers for safety. 2.7 at 57 is the highest tier, and then there's a tier that's that's lower than that. And so all new employees are going to have to pay 50% of their normal cost of pension in addition to going into these new tiers. In terms of current employees, not many of the reforms actually apply to current employees. There is a 50-50 goal, although that needs to be negotiated over 5 years. And if you do not reach a 50-50 sharing within 5 years, it can be imposed, but only at certain levels, at 8% for miscellaneous and 12% for safety. And so again, most of the reforms are geared more towards savings from new employees rather than current employees. So those savings are going to be realized farther into the future than they are currently.
Great, thank you. Any questions from the committee? Move to approve. Is there any public comment on this item? All in favor? Aye. Next item.
Item number 5 is a recommendation to receive and file an update on the $18.4 million Uplands Oil Fund infrastructure projects.
Is there a staff report on this item? Any updates?
No, sir, there are no updates.
Move to approve. Any questions from the committee? Any public comment? Is there a second? All in favor? Aye. Next item.
Item number 6 is the recommendation to receive and file department presentations from Harbor and Financial Management, as well as one-time fund recommendations.
Is Thank you. Is anyone here from, how about financial management? You want to go first? Just give a quick kind of summary of some of your changes in the community budget book.
Sure. The, Mr. Chair and members of the committee, the key changes from the budget office consist of savings due to what we recommend is more efficient purchasing operations, more efficient accounts payable operations, and maybe a little bit of detail in accounts payable. The idea here is to remove financial management from handling a piece of paper twice, and we believe that will save an entire position. In purchasing, there are a series of proposed efficiencies which include allowing the departments under certain limited cases to increase the amount of purchases they make as long as they follow good purchasing practices. Similarly, for items going before council, those items would be increased from $100,000 to $250,000, but again, under limited circumstances, when it's fully competitively bid, when there are no issues, and when council still gets a complete report. And then there is some increased revenue, primarily from a new staff person who would be collecting business license revenue, and a new financial control bureau if council approves it.
Thank you. Any questions from the committee? Any public comment on this item? Is there a second? All in favor? Aye. Next item.
Item number 7 is a recommendation to review city manager's proposed new resources and potential restorations.
Is there a staff report on this item? Can you walk us through it? And then I think the Budget Oversight Committee is going to perhaps modify those recommendations somewhat. But if you could review what the initial recommendations were, that would be helpful.
The key recommendations, there are a number of revenue sources, but the key ones are a potential increase in oil price, the base oil price used in the budget, not the real price of oil, from $65 to $70, which would increase operating revenue and decrease one-time revenue, and a potential $1 million realignment, if council wanted to do that, from sidewalks to operations. There are a few other miscellaneous revenue sources, and then the manager has provided a list of potential restorations, which basically is a listing of items that have been discussed in council at one time or another.
Thank you. Any questions from the committee? Yes.
Are we on the restoration? Are you talking about their restorations? Any questions about their restorations?
We are.
No, I think their restorations are good, especially with regard to the park restorations, the nature center, etc. There's just some other things I'd like to see addressed too, and I think we'll get to that conversation here very shortly.
Any other questions? All right, so since the city manager made that proposal and the council directed the recommendations to go to the Budget Oversight Committee, I've done the best that I could in reaching out to the community, talking to some individual council members, certainly my two colleagues here on the Budget Oversight Committee, just trying to get everybody's input as to what they liked, what they didn't like. So we kind of came up with a recommendation, and I'm going to go through in a moment here. It's the best I could do to kind of do a compilation of what everybody was looking for, and then trying to make some adjustments along the way to make sure that we get into balance. It may or may not be liked by my colleagues. It wasn't shot before the meeting. I don't know how many votes there are, but I think that I've done the best I could to try and take everyone's perspective into consideration. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to go through what we look at as the ongoing operating costs. So talk about where the new revenues are coming from, talk about the structural expenses, how we see to spend that money, and then when we're done that, I'll go through a list of all the one-time expenses and what the proposal is. And I'll do the best I can to distinguish between what the city manager recommended and then what I'm recommending for the BOC's approval today, subject to amendments. So the first item in new revenue was to increase the price of oil from $65 to $70 a barrel, as the city manager proposed last week. We support that. transferring a portion of the proposed Financial Controls Bureau cost to enterprise funds in the amount of $200,000. We support that. Eliminating after-hours city light power service saves $125,000. We support that. The technical services, obtainment of E-rate funding, around $75,000 for the library, some additional revenue. We support that, obviously. Moving $30,000 of cell tower revenue from the water department to the city's general fund support. There will be, in restoring the Silverado pool, and we'll get to those expenses in a moment, but when you restore those pool hours, you also generate some revenues of about $32,000. And then Parks Rec and Marine Department Head George Chapchian came up with some recommendations for some fee increases, some modest increases along the way in some of the various programs of around $335,000. None of these are new fees, so it's nothing where it was a free program today and now we're going to start charging, but there were some, if we charged a few dollars, we might charge an extra dollar a head, that sort of thing. On the expense side, and that totals $2.097 million.
Can I ask a question on that?
You can.
With regard to the $335,000, that was not in the city manager's
That's correct.
proposal last week, correct?
That's a new one.
What else was not in there last week? Do you know?
So far, that's the only thing I mentioned.
Great, thank you.
Thank you for pointing that out. On the expense side, under library services, to restore $400,000, which restores the vast majority of the community programs. In Parks and Recreation, restore $91,000 in adaptive recreation, restore $16,000 in adaptive sports, including the Milliken Pool, restoring the Silverado pools I mentioned earlier for $77,000, restoring the Nature Center at a level of, they said there are 3 FTEs equivalents that were cut in the budget, restoring 2 of those, although they're really done with part-time, so it's more of a total of 6 positions. But the Director of Parks and Rec believes that we could still provide a comparable level of service with fewer staff, so restoring $110,000 there. On the Senior Center, restoring $103,000. And then the other 2 items were, as we looked at both the one-time money we had and the structural money we have, trying to put structural costs where they belong. So for example, we added $300,000 in tree trimming. We put it here as opposed to one-time expenses to make sure we maintain that 5-year cycle. And also restoring $1 million of sidewalk repair funding. The mayor had recommended using some one-time money. Instead, we're going to put it in as structural, because again, that $3 million we spend every year that we have for the last at least 13 or 14 years is really a structural expense, not a one-time. And then that totals $2.097 million, so we're in balance there. The new ones,
Okay,
Councilmember,
let me ask you a question. We're still on new expenses. Are these different than the figures the city manager gave us? I think some of them are, I think.
the differences are in the Nature Center, restoring 2 rather than 3 FTEs, and then adding the tree trimming and the sidewalk funding as part of our structural expenses.
The tree trimming, what else, I'm sorry?
And the $1 million in sidewalk repair funding and putting that back into structural expenses.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So next, in the last category, is the one-time funding. There's a total of about $16.9 million of one-time funding. We put in $200,000 to kick off the management partners implementation of some of the recommendations. That was not in the city manager's original budget, but he did request some funding at a higher level in his subsequent communications with the council. There is $1 million with some city council discretion like last year to take care of infrastructure maintenance and repair projects in districts. That was not in the city manager's proposed budget. $400,000 to assist fire in transitioning to the new paramedic service model. That was part of the city manager's recommendation. Gender equity, city manager recommended $3.6 million. We're looking at that to be a 2-year program. Based on the amount of work, we don't see it could happen.
Excuse me, with regard to that, I believe you should defer any discussion of that until we've had the closed session.
Okay, thank you. Next item is in financial management, parking citations, billing system, and accounts payable, about $1.4 million. We're looking at doing that over a 2-year period of time, so only allocating $714,000 in this budget year. Next was city manager proposed $7.4 million in new financial and HR systems and other technology upgrades. We've trimmed that back significantly. There were a number of projects. 2 projects that we identified that seemed could be readily done in a short time frame was improvements to our land management and revenue system for $500,000 and converting the NAT system to enforced service request system, which would provide some increased operational efficiency. So a total of $1.3 million. Next item, library services, self-checkout technology. City manager proposed $400,000 and kept it at $400,000. We also added $225,000 in the mayor's economic development fund. One of the things that we heard in this process was that the city needs to do a better job at economic development and trying to attract new revenues to the city, not just cut. We're trying to create some funding to make that happen. In the police department, academy and prisoner transport vans, city manager recommended $3.125 million, and we kept that recommendation intact. In police overtime and restoration of gang unit officers, that was not part of the city manager's proposal, and we're suggesting to spend about $1.35 million on that and giving the chief some discretion there on how he uses the funds. Next item, which was not in the city manager's proposed budget, was restoring 3 of the police department, I think they're called police service specialists. They're non-sworn, they deal with the community, and adopting the city manager's recommendation, however, to put that in development services, and that will generate about $270,000 of cost. Next for the police is restoring the 4-person prisoner transport unit at $374,000. Parks and Rec, restoring after school and youth programs for $1.291 million, although I would like to point out that we'll get some additional revenues there as well. Parks and Rec, Los Cerritos, there was an item in there in the city manager's proposed budget of $500,000, and also added, that I added, was Rancho Los Alamitos capital improvement of $374,000, which was that rancho's similar to take care of all the deferred maintenance when that group took over. They've been paid paid a third of it, so we thought it was fair to provide equity there. Appropriate $2 million for Public Works citywide street slurry program. Then the last item was to continue our investments in infrastructure, particularly in street repaving, which we have not appropriated any funding on the general fund for many years, and to allocate $1.6 million in residential street repaving. And so the city manager proposed one-time revenues for $16.933 million. This comes in at $16.93. And that's a recommendation for discussion. Mr. O'Donnell, any comments?
This is good. This is consistent with what I think we've been hearing. And mostly my concerns lie along the lines of public safety. Parks and Rec, looks like we've done a good job there. Last week the city manager brought forward a number of ideas. I think we've heard from the community. It's a priority to them. It's a priority to me. I have kids. I'm a teacher. I want kids busy in those after school hours, be it the weekend or after school, for sure. As I further go down the line here, I'm concerned about public safety. I'm concerned about the rangers in the park. I'd like to see us do a little more work on that. Also, with regards to the police department, I'm not sure that restoring $1.3 million is enough, because what we've done over in the police department is we've underfunded mandatory overtime. And then what happens when we have to pay that bill at the end of the year is they have to rob from other funds. So it takes away from some detective work, some patrol officer time. So I'd like to see that bolstered a bit as well. I was a strong proponent of replenishing that fund at a larger level. And I think we heard that, and I see it here, and that's what I wanted to see here, and that's what I asked for. And the fire department is not on this list, but I did have some questions about losing the engine. And gee, is there some other things we can do to alter the service model so that we would be able to afford that engine and not take it off the streets, not take it out of service. I do have some concerns about the slurry seal program being $2 million.